I never imagined that at my mother's funeral, I'd be standing alone by her casket, feeling not just the weight of grief, but also the sharp sting of betrayal. My name is Sarah Miller, and at 34 years old, I expected to be preparing for my next elementary school year, not watching my mother Eleanor being lowered into the ground on that overcast Tuesday in September. The funeral home was filled with the scent of lilies, her favorite, and the soft murmurs of relatives and friends who had gathered to pay their respects. I kept absent-mindedly touching my collarbone, expecting to feel the antique pearl and sapphire necklace that had been in our family for generations. The one item my mother had specifically promised would be mine. "This will be yours someday, Sarah," she had said last Christmas, her fingers tracing the delicate setting that held 5 sapphires, interspersed with pearls on a platinum chain. But the necklace wasn't around my neck, and as I glanced around the funeral reception, I realized something else was missing too: my sister Rachel. At 37, Rachel had always been the ambitious one, the daughter who moved to Boston for a high-powered marketing career, while I stayed in our hometown to teach and care for Mom as she aged. I noticed Rachel had disappeared shortly after the eulogy, making a quiet exit when most guests were distracted by the photo memorial we'd arranged. Something about her hurried departure left me uneasy, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on accepting condolences and thanking those who had come. It wasn't until that evening, when I returned to Mom's house to collect a few personal items, that the truth hit me like a physical blow. I walked into her bedroom, the same room where I'd sat with her during those final weeks, as cancer slowly took her from us, and immediately headed to her antique vanity. The jewelry box, hand-carved by our grandfather, sat in its usual place, but when I opened it, the velvet indent where the necklace had always rested was empty. My stomach dropped as realization dawned. Despite our differences, despite all the years of complicated family dynamics, I never believed Rachel would stoop so low as to take the one thing Mom explicitly promised to me. But deep down, I knew exactly what had happened, and in that moment, I had no idea that this betrayal would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter our family's future in ways neither Rachel nor I could have imagined. Our family dynamics had always been complex, but not necessarily unusual, for sisters born 3 years apart. While Rachel blazed her own trail early, impatient to experience life beyond our small Midwestern town, I found joy in the simpler pleasures of staying close to home. Mom and I developed a special bond through our Sunday dinners, which became a sacred tradition after Dad died when I was in college. Every week, I'd arrive at her yellow craftsman house with fresh ingredients, and we'd cook together while sharing stories from our week. In spring and summer, we'd spend hours in her garden, Mom showing me how to coax the brightest blooms from her prize roses and hydrangeas. Rachel, meanwhile, had a more turbulent relationship with our mother. Their phone calls often ended with Rachel's voice raised, complaining about Mom's outdated views or inability to understand modern pressures. Mom would hang up looking tired, but she'd always say, "Your sister just experiences life more intensely than most." This pattern started early, Rachel taking my favorite doll when we were kids, borrowing my prom dress without asking in high school, even using my college application essay as a template for hers with minimal changes. Mom constantly mediated our conflicts, trying desperately to treat us equally, despite our differences. After completing my education degree, I bought a small bungalow just 10 minutes from Mom's house, throwing myself into teaching 3rd grade at Maple Creek Elementary. Meanwhile, Rachel climbed the corporate ladder in Boston, her visits becoming increasingly rare. Christmas if we were lucky, maybe a birthday call, and the occasional weekend when it aligned with a business trip to Chicago. When my husband Mark and I divorced 3 years ago, after he admitted to an affair with a coworker, Mom became my rock. She stayed with me that first week, when getting out of bed seemed impossible, bringing homemade soup and sitting quietly with me when words failed us both. Rachel sent a brief, "Sorry about the divorce" text 3 days after I called to tell her. Mum's first health scare came 5 years ago. A minor stroke that required a short hospital stay. Rachel flew in for exactly 48 hours, spending most of that time asking pointed questions about Mom's health insurance, retirement savings, and whether she had an updated will. The contrast between our approaches to family became glaringly obvious during our last Thanksgiving together 2 years ago. As Mom proudly served dinner on her wedding china, Rachel casually remarked, "You should really think about dividing up these valuable family items now, Mom. It would prevent arguments later." I noticed Mom's hands trembling slightly as she set down the gravy boat. Later that night, after Rachel had gone to bed in her old room, Mom confided in me, "I worry about how much emphasis your sister places on things, rather than people." These concerns continued, as Rachel's rare visits always included some comment about antiques in the house, or investment pieces in Mom's jewelry collection. Our 40-year-old family home, filled with memories rather than expensive items, somehow became the subject of Rachel's calculations. Her phone calls increasingly included questions about Mom's finances, or plans for the future, almost always ending in arguments about family obligations or money. The jealousy regarding my closer relationship with Mom bubbled beneath the surface of every interaction, with Rachel making cutting remarks like, "Of course you'd know that, since you're constantly hovering around her," whenever I shared a detail about Mom's life that she wasn't aware of. The foundation for conflict had been laid long before Mom ever got sick, brick by brick, year after year. The pearl and sapphire necklace wasn't just a beautiful piece of jewelry. It was the physical embodiment of our family's resilience and history. My great-great-grandmother, Catherine O'Malley, brought it to America hidden in the hem of her skirt when she fled Ireland during the potato famine in 1847. The story goes that she sold one of the original 7 sapphires for passage to America, keeping the remaining 6 stones as a reminder of their homeland and the family that remained behind. Over generations, the necklace passed from mother to daughter, surviving 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and countless personal tragedies. Mom wore it on her wedding day, a something blue that connected her to the strong women in our family line. She brought it out for significant life events, my high school and college graduations, Rachel's law school commencement, the anniversary dinners she continued to celebrate even after Dad passed away. The necklace became less about its monetary value and more about the tapestry of moments it had witnessed. During the Great Depression, my great-grandmother temporarily pawned the necklace to pay for medicine when her youngest child developed pneumonia. She worked extra hours as a seamstress for 6 months to buy it back, returning home triumphant with the family treasure restored. Mom shared these stories with me during quiet evenings as I sat at her feet, sometimes being allowed to carefully hold the necklace and feel its cool weight against my palm. When Rachel and I were younger, she showed no interest in these boring old family stories, preferring to read fashion magazines while Mom and I talked history. In fact, I distinctly remember Rachel dismissing the necklace during her college years, commenting that it was so outdated and not my style anyway. For Mom's 70th birthday, 3 years ago, I created a leather-bound scrapbook containing family photos featuring the necklace throughout generations. Researching details about each occasion and family member, I included the portrait of great-great-grandmother Catherine, the only known image of her, wearing the necklace in the formal studio photograph taken after they had established themselves in Boston. Mom wept when she opened my gift, holding it against her chest and saying, "You truly understand what matters, Sarah." When Rachel opened her gift to Mom, an expensive but impersonal spa certificate, the contrast was striking. It wasn't until last Christmas, however, that Rachel's attitude toward the family heirlooms changed dramatically. She arrived for a surprise 3-day visit, explaining that a major account had postponed meetings until after the holidays. During that visit, she asked Mom to show her the jewelry collection that had rarely interested her before. I watched from the doorway as Mom proudly displayed her modest treasures on her bed: Dad's pocket watch, Grandmother's cameo brooch, and the pearl and sapphire necklace taking center place. Rachel picked up the necklace, holding it to the light in a way she never had before. "You should really get this necklace appraised, Mom. I bet it's worth something substantial, now that vintage jewelry is trending." Mom merely smiled and returned the necklace to its velvet box. But later that evening, she called me into her room. I want to make sure you know that this necklace will be yours, Sarah. I've always planned for you to have it, and I've made that clear in my will. I hugged her, not realizing how important that clarification would become. The necklace had been professionally appraised 5 years earlier for insurance purposes, valued at approximately $18,000. Substantial, but nowhere near the worth of its sentimental value. As Mom's health began to decline, I helped her catalog many of her meaningful possessions, creating a detailed document noting the history and intended recipient of each item. Rachel's calls during this period frequently included casual questions about who gets what, though she framed these inquiries as helpful planning rather than self-interest. The necklace, with its 6 sapphires nestled among lustrous pearls on the platinum chain, became a silent character in our family drama, physical manifestation of Mom's love, our heritage, and ultimately, the true nature of both her daughters. The day we received Mom's pancreatic cancer diagnosis remains etched in my memory with cruel clarity. I had taken her to what we thought was a routine follow-up for her persistent back pain and fatigue. But as the doctor showed us the scan results, using words like advanced and metastasized, the floor seemed to drop from beneath us. Mom reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, as the doctor explained the survival statistics and limited treatment options. On the drive home, she stared silently out the passenger window before finally saying, "I don't want to waste whatever time I have left, feeling sick from treatments that won't save me. I want quality over quantity, Sarah." The next day, I applied for family medical leave from my teaching position, arranging for a long-term substitute to take my class for the remainder of the school year. Creating a caregiving routine became my way of maintaining control in an uncontrollable situation. Mornings started with medications and a light breakfast that Mom could tolerate, followed by gentle walks around the garden when her energy permitted. Afternoons often meant doctor appointments or naps, and evenings we spent together in the living room, me reading aloud from her favorite Jane Austen novels. As she drifted in and out of sleep in her recliner, Rachel called weekly from Boston. Her conversations with Mom brief and often focused on work achievements or industry gossip, topics that required little emotional investment. When I called to tell her the hospice nurse suggested she visit soon, Rachel explained she was in the middle of a major campaign launch and promised to come as soon as things settled down. Over 6 months, she visited exactly twice, a weekend in March and 3 days in May, each time expressing shock at Mom's deterioration before retreating to her laptop to handle some urgent emails in her old bedroom. Meanwhile, I witnessed Mom's daily courage in the face of increasing pain and diminishing independence. Her wisdom seemed to deepen as her body weakened. "Pain is just information," she would say on particularly difficult days. "It tells me where I am, but not who I am." During long nights when sleep eluded her, I would sit beside her bed, reading poetry or simply holding her hand, treasuring these moments, even through the heartbreak. Around month 4, Mom asked me to schedule an appointment with James Patterson, her attorney since Dad died. "There are some matters I need to address," she said, with uncharacteristic firmness. I drove her to his downtown office, but waited in the reception area at her insistence. After nearly 2 hours, she emerged looking tired, but oddly satisfied. "Everything will work out as it should," she told me cryptically on the drive home, refusing to elaborate further. I didn't press for details, focusing instead on managing her increasing pain and decreasing mobility. The final weeks brought a parade of hospice nurses, adjusted medication schedules, and the subtle shifting of our roles as I became less daughter and more caretaker. One night, about 2 weeks before she passed, Mom had a moment of unexpected clarity during what had otherwise been a day of medication-induced fog. She gripped my wrist with surprising strength and said, "Promise me you'll always remember your worth, Sarah. Don't let anyone convince you that you deserve less than complete respect." I promised, not understanding the full significance of her request. Rachel finally arrived just 2 days before Mom passed, wheeling her designer luggage into the house and looking uncomfortably around the medical equipment that now dominated the living room. The contrast between us couldn't have been starker. My unwashed hair and clothes bearing the evidence of weeks of round-the-clock care, while Rachel arrived in a perfectly pressed pantsuit. Checking her watch during Mom's morphine-induced sleep, we maintained an uncomfortable vigil together those final 48 hours, Rachel frequently stepping outside for important calls, while I sat constant watch, measuring Mom's increasingly labored breaths. Mom died peacefully at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, both her daughters at her bedside, but worlds apart in their grieving. As I sobbed openly, holding Mom's still warm hand, Rachel stood at the foot of the bed, dry-eyed, and already reaching for her phone. "I'll start making calls to family," she said, stepping into the hallway. Before the hospice nurse had even removed the oxygen equipment, Rachel was asking me about the funeral home's pricing options and when the will would be read. Planning Mom's funeral provided a necessary focus for my grief. In those first shocking days without her, I spent hours at Anderson Funeral Home, selecting the white lily arrangements Mom had always admired, and choosing readings from her favorite biblical passages. Mrs. Anderson, who had known our family for decades, gently guided me through decisions about the guest book, memorial cards, and service details. I selected the blue dress Mom had worn to my college graduation for her burial outfit, knowing how much she had loved it. When Rachel finally joined me at the funeral home, 3 days after Mom passed, she immediately questioned my choices. "White lilies? Do you know how expensive those are? Mom wouldn't want us wasting money," she argued. Despite knowing full well that Mom had specifically mentioned wanting lilies at her funeral, Rachel pushed for the least expensive casket option, suggested we skip the memorial video I had planned, and questioned the necessity of the post-funeral luncheon I had arranged at Mom's church. "We should be practical about this, Sarah. Beware, money would be better used elsewhere," she insisted. My patience threadbare, I finally pulled out Mom's funeral wishes document from my purse, a detailed letter she had written during her illness, outlining exactly what she wanted. Rachel fell silent after reading it, though her tight-lipped expression spoke volumes. The funeral service itself was beautiful and well-attended. The church filled with Mom's friends, former colleagues, and many of my students' families. Multiple people commented on what a wonderful caregiver I had been, and how Mom had spoken proudly of me during her illness. Several distant relatives approached me with condolences, including Uncle William, Dad's older brother, who had stayed close to Mom after Dad died. "Your mother wanted you to have her necklace, didn't she?" he asked quietly during the reception. "The sapphire and pearl one from your grandmother. She told me last year she was passing it to you." I nodded, explaining that I had planned to wear it today as a tribute, but couldn't locate it in time. "I'll find it this evening when things settle down," I assured him, though a flicker of unease was beginning to grow. After the last mourners left, and the church ladies had packed up the remaining funeral luncheon food, I returned to Mom's house, exhausted but determined to find the necklace to wear at the small family gathering planned for the following day. I went straight to Mom's bedroom, to the mahogany jewelry box that had always held her special pieces. I knew exactly where the necklace should be, in the small velvet-lined drawer with the special clasp, but when I opened it, the familiar blue velvet indent was empty. Thinking that perhaps the hospice nurses, or I, had moved it during Mom's final days, I began a systematic search of her room, checking other jewelry boxes, looking through dresser, drawers, even searching coat pockets and purses. After an hour of increasingly frantic searching, the sick feeling in my stomach could no longer be ignored. When Rachel returned from her trip to pick up coffee, I casually asked if she had seen the necklace. "The sapphire one?" "No," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "Maybe Mom sold it for medical expenses. Cancer treatment isn't cheap." I stared at her, speechless. Mom's medical care had been fully covered by her insurance and Medicare supplement. Moreover, she would never have sold the family heirloom, especially after specifically promising it to me. I continued searching after Rachel went to bed, carefully examining the jewelry box again, and noticing the distinct impression in the velvet where the necklace had rested for decades. Proof it had been there recently. The following morning, I noticed Rachel clutching her unusually bulky handbag protectively as she announced she needed to return to Boston for an important client meeting. I thought you'd be staying until the will reading next week, I said, watching her face carefully. Patterson's office called to confirm for next Tuesday. Rachel hesitated, clearly calculating. I guess I could reschedule some things, she finally conceded, looking displeased. That evening, we had a quiet dinner with Uncle William and Aunt Judith. I couldn't help noticing that Rachel wore a high-necked blouse, unusual for her typically more revealing style, especially in the summer heat. When she leaned down to retrieve a dropped napkin, the movement revealed just the smallest glimpse of what looked like a pearl chain at her neckline. My heart pounded as I processed what I was seeing, but I maintained my composure, deciding that a public confrontation would only create a scene. Instead, I carefully observed her protective posture whenever anyone came near. The way she flinched when Uncle William mentioned family heirlooms, and her obvious relief when she could retreat to her room for the night. The evidence was circumstantial, but mounting, and I needed to decide how to address what was becoming increasingly clear. Rachel had taken the one thing Mum had explicitly promised to me. The definitive proof arrived the morning after Rachel returned to Boston, claiming she absolutely had to be there for an emergency client meeting. I was mindlessly scrolling through social media, seeking distraction from grief, when I stopped, cold at a photo posted by one of Rachel's colleagues. The image showed Rachel at what appeared to be a corporate cocktail event, wearing a black dress with a plunging neckline. Around her throat, partially visible but unmistakable, lay our mother's pearl and sapphire necklace, its distinctive center sapphire catching the light. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor as a wave of nausea washed over me. The betrayal felt physical, like a blow to my chest that left me struggling to breathe. With shaking hands, I saved the photo, then called Rachel immediately. She let the call go to voicemail twice, before finally answering with an irritated, "What is it, Sarah? I'm heading into a meeting." I cut straight to the point. "I just saw a photo of you wearing Mom's necklace at your work event." The momentary silence confirmed everything before she even spoke. "What are you talking about?" she attempted, her voice artificially casual. "I saw the photo, Rachel. You're wearing Mom's necklace. The one she promised to me. The one that mysteriously disappeared from her jewelry box after the funeral." Another pause. Then Rachel's tone shifted from denial to defense. "Fine. I took it. I was the oldest. It should have been mine anyway. You got everything else by staying close to home and playing the perfect daughter." Her words stung like salt in an open wound as she continued. "You manipulated Mom for years, making sure you were the favorite. What was I supposed to get? Nothing but the leftovers after you took the house, the good jewelry, her trust. I stood in Mom's kitchen, the same space where she had taught me to bake cookies, and where we'd shared countless Sunday dinners, clutching the phone and trying to process my sister's vicious accusations. Mom promised me the necklace specifically, Rachel. She told everyone that. It wasn't a secret." "Whatever," Rachel snapped. "It looks better on me anyway." Mom would have changed her mind if she'd seen how perfect it is with my collection. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing amid the broken ceramic shards of my mug. A fitting metaphor for the shattered relationship with my only sibling. That night became one of the longest of my life. Worse even than the sleepless vigils during Mom's final days. At least then, I'd had purpose in my pain. Now I tossed and turned, replaying years of interactions with Rachel, wondering if I had somehow contributed to the rift between us. Had I actually monopolized Mom's attention? Was there truth in Rachel's bitter accusations? Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the living room, pulling out old photo albums from the bookshelf. I flipped through images chronicling a childhood, Rachel and me building sandcastles at the lake, blowing out birthday candles, unwrapping Christmas gifts. In almost every photo, Mom had her arms around both of us, her smile encompassing her two daughters equally. There was no evidence of the favoritism Rachel claimed, just a mother who loved her children, and one daughter who chose to stay close, while the other chose distance. Among Mom's Bible on the end table, I found a note in her handwriting, marked with a date just 3 months ago. "To thine own self be true. Stand firm in what you know is right." Whether she had left it for me to find, or simply as a reminder to herself, it felt like a message from beyond. strengthening my resolve. The next morning, I called my best friend Jennifer, pouring out the whole painful story. "You need to demand she return it," Jennifer insisted. "That's straight up theft. You could even report it to the police if you wanted to, but the thought of criminal charges against my own sister, especially so soon after losing Mom, felt extreme. I don't want to create more drama," I explained. "But I can't just let her take something so important either." For a brief moment, I wondered if I was overreacting about just a piece of jewelry, as Rachel might say. Then I remembered Mom's words about always remembering my worth and not accepting less than complete respect. This wasn't merely about a necklace. It was about honoring Mom's wishes and standing up for myself against Rachel's bullying behavior. That afternoon, I composed a careful email to Mr. Patterson, confirming our appointment for the will reading the following Tuesday and casually mentioning, "There's been a situation regarding Mom's pearl and sapphire necklace that she specifically left to me. My sister Rachel took it from Mom's jewelry box after the funeral and has refused to return it. I'm not sure if this affects anything regarding the estate." I expected a brief acknowledgement, perhaps a note that we could discuss it at the reading. Instead, Mr. Patterson's response arrived within 30 minutes, requesting a private meeting at his office the following morning, before the official will reading. "There are matters we should discuss regarding your mother's estate and the situation you've described," he wrote cryptically. His unusually prompt response and request for a private meeting suggested this was more significant than I had realized. I decided then that I would handle this situation through proper legal channels, rather than through emotional confrontation with Rachel. That night, I sat in Mom's room, holding the empty jewelry box, its velvet impression the only evidence remaining of the necklace's existence in this house. "What were you trying to teach us, Mom?" I whispered into the quiet room. "What did you know that I didn't?" No answer came, of course, but as I finally fell asleep in her bed, I felt strangely certain that Mom had somehow prepared for this very situation. The following morning, I drove downtown to Patterson Law Offices, located in a converted Victorian home, with an imposing oak door and brass nameplate. The 20-minute drive gave me time to collect my thoughts, though my stomach knotted with anxiety over the coming confrontation with Rachel at tomorrow's official will reading. The receptionist, a silver-haired woman who had worked with Mr. Patterson for decades, greeted me warmly and immediately ushered me into his wood-paneled office. James Patterson rose from behind his substantial desk, offering a firm handshake before gesturing to the leather chair across from him. At 60-something, with steel-gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he exuded the calm competence that had made him Mom and Dad's trusted legal advisor for over 30 years. "Sarah, thank you for coming in," he began, settling back into his chair. "I was very sorry to hear about Eleanor's passing. She was a remarkable woman." After expressing his condolences, he folded his hands on the desk, his expression shifting to something more measured. "Your email about the necklace situation concerns me, though I can't say I'm entirely surprised." My confusion must have shown on my face as he continued. "I was expecting this might happen, based on conversations with your mother." I leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Mr. Patterson opened a folder before him, removing a document that I recognized as Mom's will. "Do you recall when Eleanor came to see me about 6 months ago, when you drove her but waited outside?" I nodded, remembering that mysterious appointment during Mom's illness. "Your mother was very concerned about family harmony after her passing. She specifically mentioned tensions between you and your sister, particularly regarding family heirlooms and personal possessions." He adjusted his glasses before continuing. "Eleanor was especially worried about the pearl and sapphire necklace. She told me quite directly that she had promised it to you, but she feared Rachel might try to claim it, despite her wishes." I felt a chill at how accurately Mom had predicted this very situation. During that appointment, your mother added a specific clause to her will, what we sometimes call a no-contest provision, though this one is more detailed than most. He turned the document toward me, pointing to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. I read the formal legal language slowly, my breath catching as I understood its implications. If any beneficiary takes possession of items specifically designated for another beneficiary prior to the official distribution of assets, said beneficiary forfeits their portion of the remaining estate, which shall be redistributed to the beneficiary whose designated items were wrongfully taken. Mr. Patterson watched my expression carefully as I processed this information. Your mother explained her reasoning to me, he said quietly. She told me, I know my daughters. This will prevent lasting damage. Rachel needs to learn that actions have consequences, and Sarah needs to stand firm in what's rightfully hers. Tears welled in my eyes at hearing Mom's wisdom, extending beyond her death, still trying to parent us both in her way. I don't understand, I said, wiping my eyes with a tissue from the box Mr. Patterson discreetly pushed toward me. How does this work in practice? Do you need proof that Rachel took the necklace? He nodded, his expression serious. Yes, we would need evidence. Your word alone wouldn't be sufficient for such a significant consequence. But from your email, it sounds like you have photographic evidence. When I described the social media photo showing Rachel wearing the necklace, he nodded. That would likely be sufficient, especially combined with your testimony and the fact that the item is clearly identifiable as your mother's necklace. The magnitude of the situation was beginning to sink in. This would mean Rachel loses her entire inheritance? Mr. Patterson nodded again. With the exception of a few personal items specifically designated for her, yes. Her portion of the financial assets and property would be redirected to you. It's a severe consequence, which is why your mother designed it that way, as a powerful deterrent that unfortunately wasn't heeded. He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. I want to be clear, Sarah. My ethical obligation is to execute your mother's will according to her wishes. But this clause only comes into effect if you choose to present the evidence of the necklace theft. You could decide not to pursue this, in which case, the inheritance would be distributed according to the primary provisions of the will. The weight of this decision settled heavily on my shoulders. On one hand, Rachel had blatantly stolen something precious that Mom had explicitly intended for me. On the other hand, implementing this clause would escalate our conflict dramatically and permanently alter our already strained relationship. I need to think about this, I said finally. Mr. Patterson nodded understandingly. That's wise. This is not a decision to make hastily. We have the will reading scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. You have until then to decide how you want to proceed. He handed me a copy of the relevant will section, which I carefully placed in my purse. One more thing, he added as I stood to leave. Your mother was a very thoughtful woman. She didn't add this clause out of spite or to create conflict. She told me she saw it as her final teaching moment for both her daughters. About respect, consequences, and standing up for what's right. Driving home, I felt Mom's presence more strongly than at any point since her death. This clever legal maneuver was so characteristic of her quiet wisdom, creating a consequence that spoke directly to Rachel's materialism while testing my ability to stand firm. That night, I sat on the porch swing, reading and rereading the clause as dusk settled around me. The decision before me wasn't really about money or even the necklace anymore. It was about honoring Mom's final lesson to both her daughters. By midnight, watching the stars from Mom's garden, I knew what I needed to do. The official will reading was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Patterson Law Offices. I arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in a simple navy dress and pearl earrings that had been a gift from Mom years ago. Uncle William and Aunt Judith were already seated in the waiting area, both offering warm hugs. Before we lapsed into polite small talk about the unusually warm weather, Cousin Michael arrived next, his presence surprising me slightly, as he had never been particularly close to our family. The tension in the room escalated when Rachel finally swept in at 2:07 p.m., making a dramatic entrance in a tailored black suit and stiletto heels, apologizing loudly about terrible traffic from the airport. Her eyes briefly met mine before darting away, her hand unconsciously rising to her throat, where the necklace had been in the photo, but was conspicuously absent today. Mr. Patterson welcomed everyone and ushered us into the conference room. with its imposing mahogany table and leather chairs. He began the proceedings with standard formalities, expressing condolences and explaining the purpose of the gathering. The early portions of the will reading proceeded predictably. Mum's request for cremation had already been honored. Her charitable donations to the church and local library were noted, and several small personal bequests were listed. Aunt Judith would receive Mum's collection of first edition Jane Austen novels. Uncle William was left Dad's fishing equipment and vintage tackle box, and Cousin Michael was bequeathed Grandfather's pocket watch. The atmosphere remained somber, but civil, as Mr. Patterson methodically worked through these smaller items. When he reached the section about major assets, I noticed Rachel leaning forward slightly, her pen poised over a small notebook. Mr. Patterson detailed how Mum's house and its contents would be sold, with proceeds divided equally between Rachel and me, each receiving approximately $215,000 based on current appraisals. Mum's investment accounts and life insurance policies would likewise be split evenly, with each daughter receiving roughly $185,000. I watched Rachel making rapid calculations in her notebook, a satisfied smile playing at her lips as the total approached $400,000 per person. As Mr. Patterson turned to the final pages, he adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Now, we come to specific personal items of significance," he announced, his tone unchanging, though I detected a brief glance in my direction. "Eleanor specifically designated that my pearl and sapphire necklace, a family heirloom passed down through generations, shall go to my daughter Sarah Miller, who has always appreciated its history and significance." A brief silence followed this pronouncement, during which I observed Rachel's shoulders tense, almost imperceptibly. Mr. Patterson looked up from the document, his gaze sweeping the room. "Does anyone know the current location of this necklace? It seems to be of particular importance to the deceased." The silence lengthened uncomfortably until I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I expected. "Rachel took it from Mom's jewelry box immediately after the funeral. She's been wearing it in Boston." Rachel's head snapped toward me, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. "That's ridiculous. I don't have it. How dare you accuse me?" Mr. Patterson calmly reached into a folder and produced a printed copy of the social media photo I had emailed him that morning. Rachel at her corporate event, Mom's distinctive necklace, clearly visible around her throat. This photograph appears to show Rachel Miller wearing what matches the description of Eleanor Miller's pearl and sapphire necklace. Approximately 4 days after Eleanor's funeral, he stated for the record. Rachel's face flushed crimson, but before she could respond, Mr. Patterson continued reading from the will. "Furthermore, Eleanor included a specific condition in her will that I am now obligated to invoke. The clause states that if any beneficiary takes possession of items specifically designated for another beneficiary prior to the official distribution of assets, said beneficiary forfeits their portion of the remaining estate." He looked directly at Rachel as the implications sank in. "Based on the evidence presented, this clause has been triggered. According to Eleanor's explicit wishes, Rachel Miller's portion of the estate, with the exception of personal items specifically designated for her, will be redirected to Sarah Miller." The conference room erupted into chaos. Rachel leapt to her feet, her chair tipping backward with a crash. "This is absurd. This can't be legal. Sarah put you up to this, didn't she? This is a conspiracy." Her voice rose to a shout as Uncle William tried unsuccessfully to calm her. Mr. Patterson remained unruffled. "I assure you, Ms. Miller, this clause was added by your mother 6 months ago, with proper witnesses present. It is entirely legal and binding." Rachel turned to me, her face contorted with rage. "You planned this all along, didn't you? Little perfect Sarah, always manipulating everyone. You probably told Mom to add that clause." I maintained my composure, though my heart raced. "I had no idea about the clause until yesterday, Rachel. Mom added it because she knew you might do exactly what you did." Uncle William attempted to mediate, his voice reasonable. "Rachel, if you just return the necklace." "Return it," Rachel interrupted bitterly. "Fine, you can have the stupid necklace. It doesn't even go with most of my outfits anyway." She turned to Mr. Patterson. If I give back the necklace now, we can cancel this ridiculous clause, right? The attorney shook his head slightly. I'm afraid the clause has already been triggered. The will is quite clear that the act of taking the item is what activates the consequence, not whether the item is eventually returned. Rachel's face paled as the reality of the situation became inescapable. With a strangled cry of frustration, she grabbed her designer purse and stormed toward the door. This family has always been against me. You'll be hearing from my attorney. The door slammed behind her with such force that the framed law degrees on the wall vibrated. An uncomfortable silence descended on the room. Finally, Uncle William sighed deeply. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing, didn't she? I nodded, unable to trust my voice in that moment. Mr. Patterson concluded the meeting with assurances that he would handle all necessary paperwork and be in touch regarding next steps for the estate distribution. I walked to my car in a daze, the reality of what had just happened still not fully registering. Mom's house, her savings, everything would now come to me. Not because of any manipulations on my part, but because Rachel couldn't resist taking what wasn't hers to take. The victory felt hollow as I drove home alone. The weight of family brokenness, heavier than any inheritance could counterbalance. That night, sitting in Mom's garden, as twilight settled around me, I finally allowed myself to feel the complex emotions I'd been suppressing. Grief for Mom, disappointment in Rachel, uncertainty about our future as sisters, and lingering doubts about whether I'd done the right thing by presenting the evidence. Despite everything, Rachel was still my only sister, my only immediate family now that Mom was gone. But as Mom had tried to teach us both through this final lesson, respect and consequences were the foundation of any healthy relationship, even between sisters. The fallout began immediately. Within hours of the will reading, my phone exploded with notifications. 12 missed calls from Rachel, followed by increasingly hostile text messages ranging from tearful pleas, "Please, Sarah, this will ruin me financially," to vicious accusations. "You manipulated Mom when she was dying. You scheming bitch." I silenced my phone, but couldn't bring myself to block my only sister, despite Jennifer's advice to cut her off completely until she calms down. The following morning, I consulted with Mr. Patterson about Rachel's threats to contest the will. She mentioned hiring a real lawyer to fight this obviously invalid clause. I explained during our call. Mr. Patterson's voice remained steady and reassuring. "The will is legally sound, Sarah. Your mother was of sound mind when she added the clause, which was properly witnessed and notarized. Rachel's case would have virtually no merit, especially given the photographic evidence of her wearing the necklace." His professional assessment provided some comfort, but the emotional turmoil continued to build as extended family members began taking sides. Aunt Judith called that afternoon, her normally warm voice chilled with disappointment. "I never thought you'd be so greedy, Sarah. Your mother would be ashamed of how you've treated your sister." I tried explaining the situation, that I hadn't created the clause, and that Rachel had stolen the necklace Mom explicitly left to me. But Aunt Judith had already made up her mind. "Rachel made a mistake taking a necklace. You're taking her entire inheritance. How is that fair?" she demanded before hanging up. Uncle William thankfully offered a different perspective when he stopped by with a casserole that evening. "Your mother understood Rachel better than anyone," he said, settling into a kitchen chair with a cup of coffee. "Eleanor watched how Rachel behaved after your father died. Always asking about money, treating family heirlooms like commodities. This wasn't spite. It was Eleanor trying to teach Rachel a final lesson about values." His support meant more than he could know during those isolating days. 3 days after the will reading, I discovered Rachel had launched what could only be described as a social media campaign against me. Several mutual childhood friends forwarded me links to her posts, which carefully skirted libel while painting me as a manipulative caretaker who had tricked our dying mother into changing her will and stolen my rightful inheritance through legal technicalities. The public airing of our private family matter felt like yet another violation, but Mr. Patterson advised against responding online. Any public statement will only escalate the situation and provide Rachel with more ammunition, he counseled. The legal outcome is secure. Don't get pulled into emotional warfare. I followed his advice, though each new notification felt like a fresh wound. The following Tuesday, a week after the contentious will reading, I received a package at my door, a small bubble mailer with no return address. Inside was Mom's necklace, or rather, what remained of it. The platinum chain was broken in 3 places, 2 pearls were missing entirely, and one of the sapphires had been pried from its setting, leaving a jagged, empty space, like a missing tooth. A handwritten note accompanied the damaged heirloom. "Here's your precious necklace. Hope it was worth it." I sank to the floor of the entryway, cradling the broken pieces in my palm, tears flowing freely for the first time since the will reading. This deliberate destruction felt more personal than any social media attack, a physical manifestation of Rachel's rage and resentment. That same evening, a final devastating email arrived from Rachel. "I hope you're happy now that you've shown everyone what you really wanted all along. You played the perfect daughter for years, making me look like the villain, while you manipulated Mom into loving you more. You've wanted me out of the picture since we were kids, always trying to prove you were better, more caring, more deserving. Well, congratulations, you've won. You have Mom's house, her money, and her precious necklace. I hope you choke on all of it. Don't contact me again." Reading those bitter words, I experienced a moment of startling clarity. This conflict had never truly been about the necklace, or even the inheritance. It stemmed from Rachel's deeply rooted belief that she had somehow been loved less, appreciated less, valued less throughout our lives. Whether this perception had any basis in reality seemed almost irrelevant now. It was her truth, the lens through which she viewed our entire family history. This realization compelled me to reach out one final time. Not from a place of anger or vindication, but from compassion. I sent a brief text. "Can we meet at Mom's grave this Sunday at 10 a.m.? Just you and me. No lawyers, no family, no accusations. I think we both need closure." To my surprise, Rachel agreed with a terse, "Fine." That Sunday morning dawned clear and cool, the cemetery peaceful, except for distant bird song. I arrived early, placing fresh hydrangeas, Mom's favorites, against her temporary marker. Rachel arrived precisely at 10, her designer sunglasses failing to completely hide her red-rimmed eyes. We stood in uncomfortable silence before I spoke. "I didn't know about the clause, Rachel. I never asked Mom to add it, and I never expected any of this to happen." She scoffed, but I continued steadily. "But I think Mom knew exactly what she was doing. She understood us both. My need to stand up for myself and your," I paused, choosing my words carefully, "your complicated relationship with family possessions." Rachel remained silent, her arms crossed defensively. "I've been thinking about what to do with the inheritance," I continued. "I'm establishing a college trust fund for any children you might have in the future. Half of what would have been your portion will go there. It's already arranged with Mr. Patterson." This clearly wasn't what Rachel expected. Her posture shifted slightly, arms dropping to her sides. "Why would you do that?" she asked, suspicion evident in her tone. "Because we're still sisters," I said simply. "And while I can't excuse what you did, I understand that your perspective on our family is different from mine. Mom wanted us both to learn something from this, I think." The rigid line of Rachel's shoulders softened almost imperceptibly. "I shouldn't have taken the necklace," she admitted, the words clearly difficult for her. "And I definitely shouldn't have broken it. That was childish." The admission, small as it was, felt monumental between us. "Mom knew me better than I knew myself," she added, after a long pause, removing her sunglasses to wipe her eyes. "She knew exactly what would hurt me most. Not losing money, but being caught taking something that wasn't mine." We didn't hug or make dramatic reconciliation promises. When Rachel left 20 minutes later, there was no guarantee of a restored sisterly relationship. But she walked away with dignity rather than rage, and I counted that as significant progress. After she drove away, I remained at Mom's grave, absently tracing the letters of her name on the temporary marker. "Was this what you intended all along?" I asked softly. No answer came, of course. But as the morning breeze rustled the hydrangea petals, I felt an inexplicable sense of approval, as if Mom was acknowledging that both her daughters had finally begun to learn their respective lessons. 6 months after the contentious will reading, autumn leaves carpeted Mom's front yard, now legally my front yard, though I still thought of it as hers. The process of settling her estate had been completed with surprising efficiency thanks to Mr. Patterson's diligence. Mom's house remained largely unchanged, though I'd moved some of my own furniture in, creating a blend of her life and mine that felt right somehow. The financial aspects of the inheritance required adjustments to my thinking. As a teacher accustomed to careful budgeting, suddenly having substantial investments and no mortgage felt surreal. After considerable reflection, I'd made several significant decisions about the inheritance. First, I established the Eleanor Miller Memorial Scholarship at the local community college, where Mum had taken art classes after Dad died. The annual scholarship would support a single parent returning to education, something Mum would have wholeheartedly approved. Second, I followed through on creating the trust fund for Rachel's future children, ensuring that regardless of our personal relationship, Mum's legacy would extend to the next generation. The damaged necklace had been entrusted to Anderson's Jewelry, a fourth-generation family business downtown. Mr. Anderson, who remembered the necklace from when Mum brought it in for periodic cleaning, took on its restoration as a personal project. We'll need to source matching pearls and reshape the setting for the missing sapphire, he explained, examining each broken piece with jeweler's loupes. But we can restore it very close to its original condition. The $3,200 restoration cost seemed insignificant compared to preserving the family heirloom that had survived far worse over its 170-year history. My relationship with Rachel remained complicated. We weren't exactly estranged, but neither were we close. She had returned to Boston immediately after our cemetery meeting, and our communication since had been limited to occasional texts about practical matters. I made a point of sending her photos of items from Mom's house before donating or selling them, asking if she wanted any specific pieces. Usually she declined, but occasionally she requested something. Mom's collection of travel magnets, a particular watercolor from the hallway, the recipe box with handwritten family favorites. Each small interaction felt like placing a single stone on a new foundation, not rebuilding what was lost, but perhaps creating something that could eventually be stable. A surprise came at Thanksgiving when a card arrived from Rachel, containing no dramatic apology or emotional declaration, just a simple note. Thinking of you during the first holiday season without Mom. Take care of yourself. Those 2 sentences represented more emotional maturity than Rachel had demonstrated in years, and I accepted them as the peace offering they appeared to be. My own healing process found unexpected outlets. I began volunteering at the local historical society, helping catalog and preserve family histories donated by longtime community members. The work felt meaningful, connecting me to a broader understanding of how family stories shape individual lives across generations. For the necklace, I commissioned a special display case with UV protective glass and a small plaque detailing its journey through our family. Rather than keeping it locked away, I placed it prominently in the living room, where its beauty and history could be appreciated daily. The sapphires and pearls, now professionally restored, caught the light just as they had when Mom wore them, a physical reminder of continuity despite loss. My elementary school classroom became another place of healing. Teaching third graders provided a daily reminder of life's continuity and the importance of passing on values and knowledge. On particularly difficult days, their uncomplicated enthusiasm and resilience offered perspective that no self-help book could match. One Thursday evening in March, nearly 10 months after Mom's passing, an unexpected email arrived from Rachel. I'll be in town next weekend for a college friend's wedding. Would you be open to getting coffee on Sunday morning? No drama, promise. I hesitated only briefly, before responding affirmatively, suggesting the small cafe where Mom had often taken us for special treats when we were young. The prospect brought both anxiety and cautious hope, not for an instant fairy tale reconciliation, but perhaps for a more authentic adult relationship than we'd managed thus far. Throughout this challenging year, I'd gradually recognized my own growth, the Sarah who had always avoided conflict, who had often yielded to Rachel's stronger personality to keep the peace, had found her voice. Mom's final lesson, embedded in that clever legal clause, wasn't just about consequences for Rachel, but about self-advocacy for me. Learning to stand firm in my own worth, while maintaining compassion, proved to be her most valuable legacy. The restored necklace received its first public wearing at the dedication ceremony for the Eleanor Miller Memorial Scholarship, standing at the podium to present the inaugural award to a single mother returning to school at 43. I felt the comforting weight of the pearls and sapphires against my collarbone. Several attendees commented on its beauty, giving me the opportunity to share bits of its history and significance. In those moments of storytelling, I felt Mom's presence strongly, as if she stood just behind my shoulder, nodding approval. Later that evening, alone in Mom's garden, where spring flowers were just beginning to emerge, I touched the necklace and reflected on the turbulent journey of the past year. I understand now, Mom, I said softly to the twilight air. This was never really about jewelry or money, was it? It was about teaching us both that integrity matters more than possessions, and that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what can be worn or held, but the wisdom to know our own worth. As I continue moving forward, I carry this understanding as my true inheritance, more precious than any sapphire, more lasting than any legal document, and more personal than any physical possession. Mom's final lesson ensures that no matter what challenges arise in my relationships with Rachel or others, I have the inner resources to face them with both strength and grace. What about you? Have you ever experienced a family conflict over an inheritance or meaningful possession? How did you balance standing up for yourself while trying to preserve important relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my experience, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might be facing similar challenges. Remember that even in our most painful family moments, there are opportunities for growth and healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you wisdom and courage in navigating your own family journeys.